Alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. We had already begun Surah Maida in our last session, and we had completed discussion on the first three verses. We had already discussed that as far as this surah is concerned, it has a very special ring to it. It founds a counterpart with Surah Nisa, which is the previous surah, and also discussed a number of times is the fact that this is the first chapter of the Quran, and the last surah of this first chapter is the current surah, which is Surah Maida. So, just to revise, the Quran has been divided into seven chapters. In each chapter, we have the Meccan surahs, with which a chapter begins, and a chapter always ends on the Medinan surah or more than one Medinan surah. And this is the pattern in all these chapters of the Quran. These chapters are arranged according to a certain sequence, and that sequence is one in which the culmination of these chapters takes place in chapter number 2, in which judgment is pronounced between the two important and significant denominations which were in front of the Prophet, the people of the book, on one hand, which were mostly in Medina, and of course the idolaters of Arabia, who existed mostly in Mecca, but of course they were also found in Medina as well. So judgment was pronounced on them in chapter number 2, and this is how the Quran actually reaches its culmination. It is basically a book in which the final judgment regarding the nation of the Prophet is pronounced in this world, and the chapters are arranged accordingly. In each chapter, of course, we have also discussed that the surahs, they occur in pairs. There are certain exceptions. For example, in this very first chapter, Surah Fatiha is an exception. It does not have a counterpart. Other than that, the other four surahs, they form pairs between them. So we have Surah Baqarah and Al Imran forming one pair. Both of them also begin with the same name, which is Alif Lam Mim, also pointing out to the fact regarding their paired nature. And the second group, or the second pair in this chapter, is Nisa and Maida, which are surahs 4 and 5 respectively. Also in this chapter, the only Meccan surah is Surah Fatiha, the first surah. All the rest of the four surahs, they are Medinan surahs. So we had begun Surah Maida and also discussed the fact that in this surah, the final Sharia of the Almighty has been completed, and at the same time, some of the important directives are given, and it is stated that this Sharia is like a covenant which the believers have made with God. And this covenant is something that they need to abide by. And in this regard, the certain restrictions that they had been imposed on the Jews and of course the Israelites, they were lifted because of the arrival of the last prophet, and they were told that with this arrival, uh, a lot of restrictions that had been imposed on them because of their unruliness, because of their rebellion, would be lifted, and therefore they should be welcoming this final prophet and welcoming this last prophet wholeheartedly. Unfortunately, we know from history and from the Quran as well that a very large chunk of the people of the book did not accept this last prophet, and in spite of being convinced that he is the one they were waiting for, and a small part of these people of the book did accept faith, and they became followers of Prophet Muhammad, and they have been mentioned variously in the Quran with lots of words of praise. So now we continue with our current set of verses, which is now verse number 4, or in fact verse number 5, that we will be looking at. We had finished until verse number 4, to be precise. So this says, Al-yawma uhilla lakum at-tayyibat وطعام الذين أوتوا الكتاب حل لكم وطعامكم حل لهم والمحصنات من المؤمنات والمحصنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم إذا آتيتموهن أجورهن محسنين غير مسافحين ولا متخذي أخدان ومن يكفر بالإيمان فقد حبط عمله وهو في الآخرة من الخاسرين. All pure things have now been made lawful to you. Consequently, the food of the people of the book is lawful to you and yours to them. Similarly, the bounds and limits of polytheism and monotheism have also become evident. Hence, lawful to you are the chaste women of the Muslims and also the chaste women of those who were given the book before you, when you give them their dowers, with the condition that you too desire chastity, not lewdness, nor becoming secret paramours. However, always keep your faith pure, and do bear in mind that those who reject faith, all their hard work ended in vain, and in the world to come, they will be among the losers. So, as you can see, viewers, that some of the important instructions that relate to the dietary laws as well as to social and family laws are once again taken up here. And by the words "Al-yawma uhilla lakum at-tayyibat," a very important fact or a very significant reality is pointed to, and that is that everything which is pure and wholesome is something which is allowed for believers. And of course, the opposite of tayyibat is khaba'is, which means something which is not wholesome and something which is not pure. So the implication is that all those things are allowable, which, because of their temperament and nature, are in congruence with humanity and which are regarded as appropriate to be eaten by all those who have a refined taste, except if the Almighty, through His prophets, has corrected. Of course, we know there are some mistakes in it. So, as far as this particular directive is concerned, it actually tells us that the things which are prohibited, they need not be presented in the form of a list, because human nature is already very aware of what is to be eaten and what is not to be eaten. Normally, things which are predators or carnivorous and who tear open their prey, they are not eaten by human beings. So vultures and lions and tigers and sharks, these are not generally regarded to be edible because of their particular nature. They are predators and they cut open their prey while hunting them. So human nature is also averse to them, and of course that is why they are called khabais. Tayyibat, of course, is an Arabic term which means tayyib lit ta'am. So tayyib lit ta'am would mean appropriate for eating, something which is in congruence to our own nature. And we have already discussed this, that bahimatul an'am are the animals which are absolutely allowed, like the cow, the camel, the goat, and of course some wild animals like the deer and the antelope, etc. So all these animals are allowed and absolutely fine to be eaten. And then it is stated, as you can see from this fifth verse, that as far as this food is concerned, now once every boundary has been clarified, we know what is allowed and what is not allowed. So there is absolutely no problem with the people of the book consuming food from where the believers are and where they eat. And similarly for the believers, there is absolutely no problem if they consume the food of the people of the book, because now everything has become clear. The way people slaughter animals, they now take the name of God while consuming them. So the right and the wrong have been absolutely ascertained. The people of the book, they are told that a lot of restrictions that had been imposed upon them because of their rebelliousness, these restrictions have been lifted, and now they are free to eat. So the things that they had made prohibited among themselves, also that restriction has been lifted, because these restrictions were either their own self-imposed ones, or they were ones that had been imposed because of their rebelliousness. So now they can freely eat from one another. And connected to this socialization is also the fact that now people of the book can marry amongst Muslims can marry amongst them, and of course the reverse can also take place. But the condition is that chastity has to be maintained. It should not be the fact that you are seeking paramours, and it's at the same time dowers which are must also be given. We've already explained this, that the philosophy of dower is that when a person makes this commitment to a bride, that he is going to be his financial or her financial sustainer, someone who's going to provide her with financial sustenance, then as a token of this responsibility that he intends to take, he pays a certain amount of money, it could be something in kind as well, to the bride, to tell her that he is solemn, he is sincere in his commitment, and as a token, he is presenting some amount to her in order to ensure her that now she is his financial responsibility. And if you study the Quran, you'll find that this dower is so important in all kinds of marriages, whether they are undertaken for the welfare of the orphans, whether they are undertaken with the people of the book, or whether they are undertaken within the Muslim creed for some other reason, or purely for the sake of marriage. In no case does Islam say that you can forego this condition. Yes, if the dower is set, and once that has been set and a wife fears that her husband would not be able to do it, or she fears any aversion from him, then the Quran says that if she settles for some lesser amount out of her own sweet will, then that is something that can be worked out. But otherwise, whatever commitment has been made by the husband must be paid at the time of, or it's in the fitness of things that it should be paid at the time of marriage, because it is on this occasion that he has to reassure his wife that a commitment that he is making of uh, of making her think that she is his financial responsibility. I mean, that token can be like a reassurance. Today, unfortunately, we know that in most cases in marriages, this dower is seldom paid, and in fact, it is at times never paid, and at times it only comes into question when the question of divorce arises, and then it is settled. So this is against the spirit and against the very objective for which a dower is given. So that is once again, as you can see, emphasized here, that if you marry amongst the people of the book, you simply cannot ignore this. You have to, in all circumstances, pay the dower and not in any way seek any way to bypass it. So وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالْإِيمَانِ فَقَدْ حَبِطَ عَمَلُهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Those who reject faith, all their hard work ended in vain, and in the world to come they will be among the losers. So obviously this is a warning which is sounded near the end, that if now that the faith has become evident, we know that the prophet who had been sent to them, who was being promised to them, he has now come among them. There was someone, I mean, he was someone they were actually waiting. They were actually, someone who they were told that there's going to be a person in the last in their own, amongst their cousins, of course, referring to the Ishmaelites, who would come and relieve them of their burdens. So they were actually really waiting for them. And so the Quran says now, if in spite of his arrival, if they continue with this attitude of denial and refuting the new messenger, then I mean, they are done for. So their hard work of waiting and of course trying to welcome the messenger, and instead of doing that, ending up doing the opposite, will end their hard work in vain, and in the hereafter they'll become losers. So going on, it says, الْيَوْمَ أُحِلَّ لَكُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ, and once that has happened, it is said that okay. I'm sorry, I think I have missed verse number 4, so I'm just going to go back. Apologies for that. So I have jumped to verse number 5, thinking that I had covered verse number 4, so I'm very sorry. Actually, verse number 4 is something that I thought had been covered in our last session, but I have just been reminded that this is a verse that was not covered. So we had actually covered until verse number 3. So going back to verse number 4, it says, يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا أُحِلَّ لَهُمْ قُلْ أُحِلَّ لَكُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَمَا عَلَّمْتُم مِّنَ الْجَوَارِحِ مُكَلِّبِينَ تُعَلِّمُونَهُنَّ مِمَّا عَلَّمَكُمُ اللَّهُ فَكُلُوا مِمَّا أَمْسَكْنَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَاذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ. They ask what is lawful for them. Say, all pure things are lawful to you, as well as the hunting animals you have taught to hunt, training them from the knowledge God has taught you. The animal hunted by them is also allowed. So eat of what they catch for you, and before you let loose the animal to catch the prey, pronounce upon it the name of God, and remain fearful of God. Indeed, swift is God in taking account. So now, of course, we have already discussed the fact that the Quran, in the next verse also that we have discussed before, it speaks about at-tayyibat, and here again the word is at-tayyibat, which means tayyib lit-ta'am, something which is appropriate for eating. And the question that had arisen in the minds of people maybe was the reason that had arisen was, earlier on it was said that if a carnivorous animal, if a beast actually cuts open a prey and you find it alive and then you slaughter it in the right way, then that is absolutely allowed for you. But here it is being said in the same vein, that if this is the case, then it may be the case, then what about predators, or maybe hunting animals which are let loose on an animal, and then that animal actually is able to catch the prey. So what about if that animal dies? Would that be considered a lawful prey or not? So it is in answer to this that it is being said that animals like dogs or any other animal which is trained for catching a prey, if you let loose that dog, unleash it, and you say Bismillah Allahu Akbar at the time of letting it loose, and that animal actually catches the prey, and the prey then dies, then as long as it has not eaten from that prey, then that prey is absolutely lawful. So فَكُلُوا مِمَّا أَمْسَكْنَا وَاذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ would mean that pronounce upon it the name of God and refrain. So if eat of them what they catch you, and before you let loose, of course, you pronounce on them the name of God. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ Inna Allaha sariyul hisab. God indeed is swift in reckoning. So al-jawarih actually means to refers to these animals which are trained for hunting purposes, regardless of whether they are a dog. I mean, they could be any animal, including dogs and other types of beasts. We know that vultures at times and other types of such animals, they are also used for hunting prey. So, but the word that is used is mukallibin, which means that you actually teach them, and then tuallimunahunna, that you teach them from the knowledge that you have gained from God. And this actually is also a very important verse which tells us that animals that are hunted through these hunting animals, and if these hunting animals they are like dogs. For example, we know that dogs are trained for this purpose. Then if they catch their prey and the prey dies as a result of that, but when the dog was unleashed, Bismillah Allahu Akbar was said, then such a prey would be lawful, which actually is a very important piece of information for all those who think that the saliva of the dog is impure. Had it been impure, of course, hunting dogs would never have been used, and the Quran would never have actually praised them. And the way they have been mentioned here is in the form of a praise. If you look at the text, it says, "Ma allamtum min al-jawarihi mukallibina tuallimunahunna mimma allamakumullah," which means that uh, uh, basically these hunting animals you have taught to hunt, training them from the knowledge God has taught you. Mimma allamakumullah. And then, of course, that knowledge is something for which the word has been used is taklib, and taklib means, of course, to train a hunting animal. In fact, to be precise, the word dog is used here, or training a dog is used here. Otherwise, of course, taking the genre into account, it could be any hunting animal, not just a dog. But the word that is used here to train an animal is taklif, which means training a dog. And of course, as I said, it's not just to train a dog, it's any animal that can be trained for the purpose of hunting, and this includes birds as well. So now it says al-yawma hilla lakum at-tayyibat, and now we have already discussed this verse, so I'm just going to move on with just this small addition that the food of the people of the book and their women, the way they have been allowed here, is something that we also must know that they were basically waiting for, because as discussed earlier, the Quran has said that one of the reasons that they were waiting for the final messenger was the fact that he would come and relieve them of the burdens and fetters that they had themselves picked and chosen for them because of their rebelliousness, or because of their self-styled prohibition, or because of at times thinking that Jacob or Yaqub alayhi salam had prohibited something out of his own personal taste, and they now thought that, well, they too must abide by this taste of Jacob. And the Quran says, of course, this is not something which is the right thing to have done. So when it is said that they are made lawful to you, it is actually after clarifying doubts about all these unclean things that this is being said to them. And when it is said that وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالْإِيمَانِ فَقَدْ حَبِطَ عَمَلُهُ, then we have to remember the Quran has once again made its point that this is something that you have to understand, that all you do in this world is going to end up in the drain. It's all going to go in vain, because this is something which is not going to pay off unless you are, if you believe in what you have already thought of as correct. So these people, about them we have seen in various passages of the Quran that they were convinced of the veracity of the message of God, which was brought by the last messenger, but they insisted on denying it, and that is why the Quran has said وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Okay, so now before we move on to the next set of verses, which now begin with a new tone, if you have any questions regarding what we have just studied, please raise them.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem, for that wonderful explanation. I'm still waiting for some hands to be raised. If anybody has any questions pertaining to the passage that we just discussed, if you have any questions, this is a time to ask. Otherwise, we will be moving on. I'll give it a minute. Okay, Siddiqa, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I just want to clarify the 5th verse. You mentioned that, just want to make sure I understood correctly, that the mention of chaste women right after mentioning all the food that is allowed or prohibited, it's only for clarification. Is that how you're saying it?
I didn't get the question.
So my question originally was like, why, like we're talking about a food that's allowed and not allowed, right? And then right at the end of that, it says that chaste women are made lawful for you. So before listening to you, I was thinking, I don't see where that comes into. Like, I don't see the context of that. We're talking about all kinds of foods, and all of a sudden, chaste women are allowed to you. But then I think you explained, and I just want to make sure I understand that God is just clarifying that all unclean things made unlawful. Is this the clarification part, or?
Yes, that is correct. So basically, you see, this is it. This is the context is that once the Sharia has been revealed, once religion has stood completed, so now there is no confusion. Because you see, there was this confusion, or there could have been this question, because the people of the book, they are basically monotheists, and they have their own view of monotheism, correct? But primarily they are monotheists. So would marriage with them stand prohibited or allowed? This was a question that was in the minds of people. And similarly, we know from the Quran that the people of the book had made certain edibles prohibited upon themselves. And we also know from the Quran that at certain instances there were other forms of edibles that were made prohibited upon them because of their rebelliousness. So the Quran has said, "Zalika jazainahum bibaghihim," that we have forbidden certain types of food because of their rebelliousness, because of their, turning up against God. So these were the two things that had actually been already being discussed in earlier surahs, and so the Quran had to make this point that if now the Sharia or the religion of God stands completed, so there should not be any question that the food that has been allowed has also been once again been pointed out, and once again, if women from the people of the book, you marry them, that is also absolutely fine. So you see, it's not like grouping women with food. It's just like pointing out certain things that were already in the air. They're about their prohibition, and the Quran is just clarifying that yes, you can go ahead with them.
Umar, please unmute your mic and ask your question. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Sir, in Malaysia, dogs are considered evil, let alone to use them as hunting animals. They are like really hated here by the Muslims, and non-Muslims who keep dogs really face huge problem due to that. Why has this happened, and what can we do to change it?
I think we've discussed this in other sessions, that this is the reason for this is because there are certain hadith narratives that have been understood incorrectly, which give us this impression that dogs are unclean, and whenever you keep a dog, then the angels of God do not enter such a house in which there is a dog, except if it is kept for the purpose of protection or for the purpose of hunting prey. Other than that, dogs as pets cannot be kept. So that is this strong impression that certain ahadith give, which is of course an erroneous impression, and this has persisted in our Muslim Ummah, and it is still persisting. And because of not understanding those narratives, dogs are still regarded to be unclean, and people are advised to stay away from them.
Thank you for that, Dr. Saleem. Shabnam, please अपना सवाल कर लीजिए. Sorry, unmute your mic and ask your question.
जी, thank you. Sir, I think that elephants, giraffes, and zebras, they are herbivorous animals. So, sir, are they halal or not?
So, I mean, in both cases, you will have just apply this, that if an animal is herbivorous and it basically consumes grass, and also does not have that wildish look upon it, I mean, then the question is just left to your own personal taste. Yes, it would be allowed, but then if you, of course, whether you can tame such an animal, you can domesticate such an animal and actually consume meat, that's another thing. I mean, you see, there are animals which are herbivorous and they can be domesticated. Domestication means that you can actually use them for your meat. So that second aspect at times is not available for animals which are as huge as an elephant, because it's very difficult to tame them or to even slaughter them. So they might be halal, but domesticating them has never been possible in the past so many centuries. So yes, they can be they are halal, but as we know, that taming them so that you can actually slaughter them is quite a job. So unless of course there is some contingency, or maybe you come across an animal in a situation that you can slaughter it, yes, you can consume it. Otherwise, for this, just because it's not possible to tame such an animal, it becomes an impossibility, I would say. Otherwise, the Sharia, of course, would not prohibit it.
Right, sir. Thank you.
Akram Bhatti sir, please unmute your mic and ask your question. Thank you.
Sir. डॉक्टर साहब मैंने सुना कि if dog touches you that's fine, but saliva is the one that's haram. But you just mentioned that when the dog catches a prey, that's saliva doesn't matter. So is it saliva haram or all the time?
It is not. I mean, this is a wrong perception that has arisen from a hadith. And in that hadith, the Prophet is supposed to have said that if a dog inserts his mouth in a utensil, then you clean it with water, and the last time that you clean it with mud and you scrub it. So this gives the impression as if the saliva was impure. But if you interpret this narrative in the light of the Quran, you will find that there must have been something different about that particular dog, because the Prophet would not have said that, because the Quran does not regard the saliva to be forbidden. Scholars have come up with this interpretation of this narrative, in which it is said that you must clean the utensil and scrub it when a dog has put his mouth in that utensil, that most probably that dog was a rabid dog. He had rabies, and we know that rabies is something that is contagious. If you drink from the same utensil, then you can actually catch rabies. So in all probability, that was the reason. But by not collating that narrative and connecting it and interpreting it in the light of the Quran, it was taken in the absolute sense. And today, almost every Muslim scholar thinks that the saliva of the dog is impure, and they don't see that if had it been impure, the Almighty would never have allowed a dog to catch the prey. How could that have been possible? So it's just a question of not understanding a hadith in the light of the Quran, because of which this anomaly has resulted. Otherwise, the saliva of a dog is the same as the saliva of a cat. So you don't feel that aversion from a cat's saliva. The same is the case with the dog. The only thing is that psychological indoctrination with which every Muslim is born with. To him, every dog is a filthy beast, and especially his saliva is something that should be absolutely stayed away from. And that is why, when we have grown up with this concept, we don't feel comfortable when the dog licks us. We think that our clothes have become impure, and we often end up either changing our clothes or doing wuzu again, which is absolutely needless. I mean, this is just an indoctrination that we have gone through. Otherwise, for all practical purposes, whatever you would do when a cat licks you is the same that you should do when a dog licks you, because there's no difference between the two.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. I have a chat question. Marriage between people of the book is if only men marrying women outside Islam. Is it
Right.
allowed, or women in Islam can also marry outside Islam to the men from the people of the book?
No, only one of that is allowed, and we'll be discussing that, of course, in due time, because that is also discussed in the Quran. That as far as women from the people of the book, they are only allowed for men, and the reason for this is that the Quran actually gives a lot of importance to monotheism, and it actually does not even want that you should marry outside your own faith to even people of the book who are women. Because, of course, in spite of being monotheists, they have their own concept of monotheism, which is a deviant form of monotheism, in which, of course, they regard Jesus to be the Son of God, and any child that they would raise is bound to have that influence from his or her mother. So that is why, if you look at the context, the Quran says that Al-Yawma uhilla lakum at-tayyibat. So Al-Yawm means that this day, when Islam stands supreme in the land of Arabia, when it has become a dominant force in Arabia, we have now allowed you to marry amongst these women from the people of the book, so that they live in subservient to Islamic traditions, and even if they have to remain on their own religion, then of course they live in a situation in which the territory or the land in which they are living in is actually very much tilted towards Islamic traditions. So al-yawma is something that is very important, and which gives us this very strong conclusion, and which of course is recommended by many scholars, that if at all this marriage is to be allowed, even with the women of the people of the book, then that is to be in areas where Islam holds that dominant force, because That is what the context tells us. So that is the important thing. It's not just that women are allowed in all circumstances. If you look at the Quran, they are actually allowed in those circumstances in which the land in which they are living is a land in which Islamic traditions, they hold sway, and so women would live in subservience to those Islamic traditions, and who knows that they might even convert because of this sway that these traditions hold.
So then, Dr. Saleem, can I ask a question? Then what about people marrying women from the Christian faith, like in the US or anywhere else in the world where it's not Islam is not the
I
dominant
mean,
force?
in my understanding, this is not recommended. I would not recommend it, but at the same time, I would not stop if I had my own child doing this, all that I can tell him or her would be that you are doing something that can really put your next generation into a lot of danger regarding their own concept of monotheism, because you see, the supreme and the most important thing for a Muslim is his attachment to one God, to monotheism. So monotheism is a big issue or should be a big issue with every Muslim. And so even within Muslims, I mean, our recommendation would be that Muslims who are pure monotheists, who in spite of being monotheists are not deviant in their concept of monotheism, we should marry them. So let alone if you're looking outside the Muslim creed. So this is a very strong recommendation. But having said that, I mean, it's a question of feeling this gravity yourself. If you feel this gravity and you have transferred this gravity to your children as well, and of course, if they do understand, then they might not even think of it. But because generally this gravity is not transferred to our children, and our children normally grow up in an atmosphere in which, I mean, they are carefree, or they have a situation in which a lot of things they stand compromised. So I think that once we are able to tell them the real situation regarding who to marry and who not to marry, the option and the choice has to be ultimately left to them, and it is their of course prerogative to do what they would like.
Okay. Dr. Saleem, another chat question. What about kangaroo? Can kangaroo be eaten?
What?
Kangaroo. Kangaroo. Can kangaroo
Yes,
be
I
eaten?
assume so. I mean, if you can tame a kangaroo and you can, I mean, for that you need to just check if a kangaroo is not a predator, because there are so many types of kangaroos. So if they are not predators, if they don't, you see, instead of going to a specific animal, the Quran gives us a principle, and we need to apply this principle on every animal that we come across, and there could be a difference in this application. So the principle that it has given us is that the the animal that we would intend to eat, it should not be a predator, which means that it hunts its prey for meat, and the way that it hunts its prey is that either it has sharp teeth or sharp claws with which it tears up its prey. That is the standard that we are given. So you can apply it to kangaroos and see the various types of kangaroos that exist. If they don't hunt their prey in a way that they tear open their prey either by their claws or by their teeth, then they should be fine.
Dr. Saleem, just have two short questions. What's the word used for hunting dogs?
Mukallibin. So mukallibin basically is, if you look at this verse, it says that tu'allimunahunna mimma allamakumullah. So basically, the word jawariha is the animal which is referred to, and jawareh actually means animals which are trained for hunting. But the verb that is used is mukallibin. So kalb in Arabic means dog. So mukallibin is like a verb that is made out of that verb, which gives us this very strong inference that these animals that are trained are primarily dogs that are implied here. I mean, that is how we infer this verse. But of course, this does not make it confined to just dogs who are trained. It's like a category of thing that we are being told, and any other thing that can come into its category will also be allowed. So primarily dogs, but any other animal which can be trained for the purpose of hunting.
Okay. Abdul Rahman Saab, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Aslan, sir. Sir, regarding cats and dogs, are the stray dogs also in this category that we can allow them to lick us, or because they are very unclean compared to the stray cats?
You see, you have to make this distinction. There is one thing which is hygiene, and there's another thing which is ceremonial or religious cleanliness. We are talking about religious cleanliness. When a dog who is unknown to you, who is a stray dog, it licks you. Of course, you should wash that part. But remember, if you don't wash it, you cannot. I mean, say that I cannot pray with that trouser that has been licked. So we are talking about religious and ceremonial cleanliness. It does not make. It does not make that garment impure. What we otherwise need to consider is that any stray animal which comes to us, he or she might be carrying some germs. So that is more a question of hygiene. And the Quran and religion leaves the matters of hygiene to our own intellect and our own understanding. We must not confuse the two. So what we are talking about is not hygiene. We are talking about an animal being intrinsically impure, its saliva being intrinsically impure. So that is what we are discussing. Otherwise, if you feel uncomfortable, even with your own pet dog, you feel that it has licked you and you feel that you should wash that, that is perfectly okay. You should do it. So that is more from the concept of cleanliness and hygiene. And that is something that is your choice. So we are specifically discussing ceremonial cleanliness, which means something that can make you religiously impure, so that can actually make the garment religiously inappropriate for offering any prayer when you're wearing that garment.
Thank you so much, sir.
Another chat question, Dr. Saleem. It's a short one. Does kufr mean committing shirk?
One form of kufr is shirk. One form of kufr.
Okay. Akram Bhatti Saab, if you can ask your question now. Thank you.
Sir, I have heard that to identify animal as halal, one, they do jugali, and number two, they don't have upper teeth. As far as upper teeth goes, rabbit has upper teeth. Is there the hadith like that, or we just heard from?
This is something from the Bible. If they chew the cud, so the cud is what they chew, which
Jugali.
means that they chew this thing, and normally these are herbivores. So herbivorous animals, they chew the cud, and that is why normally one of the signs of an animal that is appropriate for eating is that it chews the cud.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. I have no more questions at this time. You can continue with the session. Thank
So
you.
let's move on to verse number 6. Now, this is something which starts off in this way. Ya ayyuhal lazina amanu iza qumtum ila salati faghsilu wujuhakum wa aydiyakum ila al-marafiq wamsahu bi ru'usikum wa arjulakum ila al-ka'bayn wa in kuntum junuban fattaharu wa in kuntum marda aw ala safar aw jaa ahadun minkum min al-gha'it aw lamastum an-nisa فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا سعيدا طيبا فامسحوا بوجوهكم وأيديكم منه. Believers, this very cleanliness is also needed to come in God's presence. So now you can see the connection between the previous verses and the verse that actually talks about physical cleanliness. So this earlier cleanliness, of course, related to food that is clean. So remember the word clean or pure, when it is used by the Quran, it is used in the sense that things have to be spiritually pure as well. And once this spiritual purity has been discussed, the connection with the next verse is, as you can see, Ustad Ghamidi, while translating it, has connected it with the previous verse by saying that this very cleanliness is also needed to come in God's presence. So just as it was essential that you have this ceremonial cleanliness by observing the directives that have been previously been spelled out, you are being told that now also that in this case, when you are preparing yourself for the prayer, you need to be clean as well. And it is spelled out that when you rise to pray, wash your faces and your hands as far as the elbows and wipe your heads and wash your feet to the ankles also. And if you are ceremonially unclean, bathe yourselves to become clean. And if at times you are sick or on a journey, or when any of you has relieved himself, or if you've had intercourse with women and no water is available to you, find some clean surface and wipe your faces and your hands from it. So that is what now we are discussing that as far as the Quran is concerned, the reason it seems that the whole procedure of wudu has been spelled out here because it was already known before. People were already doing wudu. It seems that they were not doing it in the proper order. So here the proper order has been spelled out. So we have to understand that it is not for the first time that the Quran is informing us to do wuzu. Remember, the prayer, the fast, and all these worship rituals have existed since ancient times, and particularly after the Prophet Abraham, all of these practices have crystallized. So people were already praying, they were already doing wuzu before praying. But here the Quran has actually, the way it has narrated the whole procedure of wuzu, is to tell us that maybe there was some mistake that people were committing in the order, in the sequence in which wuzu is to be done. So now this order has been once again refreshed, that what is to be done first, what is to be done second and third and fourth, etc., etc. And from this also it will become clear that washing the mouth and rinsing our nose is something which is not part of the obligatory parts of wuzu that have to be washed. So the rinsing of the nose and rinsing of the mouth is something that is more of an etiquette that we normally do when we start wudu. It is not an essential part of wudu. And also we are told that when we are ceremonially unclean, which means that either we have had relations with the wives or the spouses, or they have ejaculated in some form, then the Quran says it is essential that you clean yourselves by bathing. So that is a different thing in which you have to actually become clean by bathing. And the third thing which is mentioned here is that in case of being on a journey, or if you are sick, or as the Quran says that you have, I mean, in this case, جاء أحدكم منكم من الغائط, or you relieved yourself, or you have been with women and you don't find water, then tayammum will suffice, both for wudu and for ceremonial uncleanliness regarding your wives. So about them it is said, if you don't find water in itself, then you are perfectly allowed to do dry ablution, which is called tayammum. And the method of tayammum, which is spelled out here, is famsahu bi wujuhikum wa aydikum. So what does that mean? It means that all that you need to do is that you just you place your hands on some dry place, and then just wipe it over your head, and then once again you just pat your hands on some dry surface, and at the same time what you can do is just wipe your forearms with that, and that would suffice as tayammum, or as you can say dry wuzu it is called, or dry ablution it is called. So what we can say is, if a person is on a journey, sickness or unavailability of water, wudu and the ceremonial bath becomes difficult. So in this verse, and we also know in Surah Nisa, earlier on that we have studied, that the Almighty has allowed this dry wuzu, or the dry tayammum, as we can say, which means that you just need to pat your hands on a dry surface, and as the Quran says, famsahu bi wujuhikum wa aydikum. So whether you are on a journey or you are inflicted with sickness, and if there is an unavailability of water, in such cases you can do wuzu, and in the case of ceremonial uncleanliness, of course, you can that would suffice for janaba as well. And then the Quran has said, "Ma yuridullahu liyaj'ala alaykum min harajin, walakin yuridu liyutahhirakum wa liyutimma ni'matahu alaykum la'allakum tashkurun," which means God does not wish to burden you. He certainly seeks to purify you. Thus, He makes it mandatory on you to do wudu and take the ceremonial bath, and wants to perfect His favor upon you. Thus, in compelling circumstances, allows you to do dry ablution, so that you are grateful to Him. So this actually tells us how important it is to actually symbolically do wudu if water is not available, or if we are sick, or if we are on a journey. So sickness and traveling in itself is something that in which you can do wuzu even if water is available. And of course, when water is not available, then it is all the more reason that you do wuzu, that you do tayammum, which is dry ablution. So the reason that it has been made mandatory is that God wants you to remember, He wants us to remember that when something cannot be done in its perfect form, in its original form, then at least we can do it in its symbolic form. So although we cannot do wuzu with water the way it should be done, but now we can do it by actually doing it in a lesser way, so that we still actually have the feeling of the fact that we have done something, and something which is a substitute of wuzu. So the thing that we have to also note is that tayammum, or dry ablution, no doubt does not clean a person, but actually it serves as a reminder for the real means of achieving cleanliness, and as such has very special importance. So we have to understand that the temperament of the Sharia The temperament of the Sharia is that if a directive cannot be followed in its real form and it becomes difficult to follow it, then lesser forms should be adopted as its substitute. And you know what? The advantage of this is that once circumstances return to normal, we become inclined to follow the directive in its original form. So that is why the Quran has said that وَلْيُتِمَّ نِعْمَتَهُ عَلَيْكُمْ, that God has done this to perfect His favor upon you. So this directive of keeping in remembrance God's favor has a emphasis, and that is the duties ensuing from this favor should be filled in letter and in spirit. And then it is said, وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَمِيثَاقَهُ الَّذِي وَاثَقَكُمْ بِهِ إِذْ قُلْتُمْ سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ بِذَاتِ الصُّدُورِ. Benefit from this concession and keep in remembrance this favor of God to you, and also His covenant with which He bound you when you said, we have heard and we are obedient. Keep it in remembrance and have fear of God, because God knows even the secrets of His hearts. So this directive of keeping in remembrance God's favor has a very special emphasis, and the covenant that is referred to here is the covenant in which, of course, people had said that we listen and we obey, and this is something that's coming up in verse number 9, that God will forgive them and abundantly reward them in the hereafter. And when it is said, Wallah inna Allah alimun bizati sudur, it actually is like a warning that don't think that if you're doing something in secrecy or in private, it's not going to be in the knowledge of God. Inna Allah alimun bizati sudur. He is someone who is aware of the secrets of the hearts also. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. Believers, it is the requisite of this covenant that you stand up for God, bearing witness to justice, and your animosity for a people should not induce you to turn away from justice. Be just. This is nearer to piety, and keep fearing God, because God is well aware of all your deeds. So, of course, the implication is that if He is aware of all your deeds, then every Muslim must know that he should adhere to justice, and if truth and justice require his testimony, he should fulfill this demand, even if this means endangering his life. He should speak the truth and submit to the truth. He should be just, bear witness to justice, and not adopt anything in his beliefs and deeds except what is true and just. So much so, even his animosity to a nation should not induce him in any way to swerve from truth and justice. So this is how the Quran wants us to be, that animosity with a nation should not allow us to be unjust to people who are enemies. So in other words, we have to be just to our enemies also. And that is something that we have to understand, that this factual evidence is something that is not going to work in our favor, that we had enmity with a certain person and so therefore we can actually be unjust to that person. No, even if you have animosity with someone, even if someone is your enemy, then you must in all cases be just to your enemies as well. And this is a very, very high standard which the Quran has set. It is something that one can even marvel at, that being just to an enemy is something that is really a very, very difficult at times requisite that the Quran has asked us for. It's a difficult thing to follow, but then this is something the Quran wants us to follow, that you have to be just not with friends, but also with enemies. وعد الله الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم مغفرة وأجر عظيم والذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا أولئك أصحاب الجحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ هم قوم أن يبسطوا إليكم أيديهم فكف أيديهم عنكم واتقوا الله وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. God has promised those who have embraced faith and done righteous deeds that for them is forgiveness and a great reward. So remember, we had just studied and just read this covenant earlier on, that we had said is kultum samina ba'atana. This covenant was referred to in verse 7. So the words of this covenant are now expressed in verse number 9, that people who embrace faith and do righteous deeds, God says, my part of the covenant is that if you do your part, which is embrace faith and do righteous deeds, then I shall forgive you and give you a great reward. And those, on the contrary, who are disbelievers and have denied our revelations, it is they who shall go to hell. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَكَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَحِيمِ. And then, as you can see, believers, remember also this favor which God bestowed upon you when you restrained the hands of a people who sought to harm you, and keep fearing God. And remember that believers should put their trust in God only. So this, of course, is a reference to the Quraysh. When it is said the hands of the people, this is a reference to the nation of the Prophet, who had all this evil intent, the evil intent to stop Muslims, to stop the Prophet in spreading their message, and their evil intent was actually stalled by God, and Muslims were finally made to prevail over them. So this is what the Quran has said, that don't forget how God had been kind to them, how they were virtually outnumbered, but God was kind to them. He showed His favor, and ultimately the Quraysh could not harm them. And even later on, if you see near the conquest of Mecca, almost all of them, except a few people, accepted faith. And so this is a great favor shown to them by the Almighty. So therefore, the final words are وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. And if you see these marvels of God around you, and if you see and continue to witness how He is helping you, then there's only one conclusion that you can draw, and that is you must put your trust in God. If today you are weak, and if today you think that you will not be able to prevail over your enemies, then you must think how in the past the Almighty has been helping you, and in the past how the previous prophets of God were ultimately helped by Him. So therefore, in no way should you lose your trust in God, and always put your trust in Him. Okay, so before you ask questions, because we finished this passage, I'm just going to first finish the idiomatic and literal translation of this passage, so that we are also able to benefit from the vocabulary of this verse. So it starts off by Ya ayyuhallazina amanu awfu bil uqud. So Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, this is a very common Arabic phrase of the Quran. So, O believers, awfu means fulfill. Uqud, your promises. So fulfill your promises. Uhillat lakum bahimatul an'am. Uhillat lakum, made lawful for you. Bahimatul an'am, which means beasts which are like cattle. Bahimatul an'am, beasts which are like cattle, which means that they are wild animals, but they are tamed. Bahimatul an'am. Except those, illa ma yutla alaykum. Except those about which you are being told. Illa, except ma yutla, what is being recited alaikum to you, which of course refers to the next verses in which that prohibition is being mentioned. Ghaira, except muhillis sayd, when you are wearing the ihram. So in that case, you cannot hunt. Antum hurum, of course, are the words. Ghaira muhillis sayd would mean without hunting a prey, such that you are muhrim, such that you are wearing an ihram. So ghaira muhallis sayd would mean not hunting animals. Wa and antum, you, hurum, are in the state of ihram. Inna allaha yahkumu ma yurid. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, yahkumu, decides. Ma yurid, what He wants. So God decides what He wants. Of course, this does not mean that He decides haphazardly. We know from all other parts of the Quran that His intent and His decision is always based on wisdom, and when He decides something, no one can stop implementing His will. So, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la tuhillu sha'air Allah. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, believers, la, not. Tuhillu, violate. Sha'air Allah, the symbols of God. Wala, and do not. Ash-shahr al-haram, the sacred months. Walal hadiya, and the animals of hadi. Walal qalaid, and those animals who are decked with collars. Wala, and not. Amin, so Amin, those who intend to visit al-bayt al-haram, the house of God. So those who intend to visit the house of God, of course, referring to pilgrims. So you should not in any way stop them, or you harm them, or consume these animals, or make anything difficult for them. And the reason is yabtahuna fadlam min rabbihim wa ridwana, because they have set out to seek the bounty of God. Yabtahuna, to seek, fadl, bounty, min rabbihim, from their Lord, Waridwana, and His pleasure. So their reason is they are not here to fight with you, they are not here to settle scores. Their reason is purely to visit the house of God. So therefore, you must not harm them. Wa iza halaltum fasfadu. So when you halaltum would mean when you take off your ihram. Fastadu, now you can hunt. So when you have taken off your ihram, you can hunt. Wa and la, not. Yajrimannakum, your enmity, or the fact that you have facing your enemy with animosity. Shana'anu qawmin, your animosity, which means against someone whom you are at war. Ansaddukum, that you should stop. Anil masjidil haram, you stop them from the sacred mosque. So, which means that once you take off your ihram, you're free to hunt. Some people had stopped you from hunting, from visiting the house of God. So even your animosity against them, la yajrimannakum shana'anu qawmin. So your animosity against them should not incite you so far as you stop them to actually visit the house of God in a way that you are committing excesses. Antartadu, that you are committing an excess, which means that this is something that you should in no way do. Wata'awanu, ta'awanu means collaborate or cooperate. Ala, on, al-bir, that is virtuous. Wa, and taqwa, which is righteous. So collaborate and cooperate with one another on that which is virtuous and righteous. Wa and la, not. Ta'awanu, cooperate. Ala, on. Al-ithm, that is evil. So do not cooperate on something which is evil. Wal udwan, udwan of course referring to the fact which is oppressive. Anything which is unjust or oppressive, do not cooperate in that. Wattaqullah, and fear God. Wattaqu, fear Allah, God, and fear God. Inna Allaha shadidul iqab. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, shadid, stern, iqab, retribution. Indeed, God is stern in retribution. Indeed, God is stern in retribution. Now, hurrimat alaykumul maytata. Hurrimat has been made prohibited. Alaykum, upon you. Al mayta, the dead. Wad dam, and blood. Walahmul khinzir, and the flesh of the swine. Wama uhilla li ghayrillah bihi. So this is one phrase actually, which means anything which is slaughtered other than in the name of God. Anything which is slaughtered in the name of other than God, anyone, the name in which it is slaughtered is something which is prohibited. And now there's a description of maita. What are those dead animals? How could those animals be dead? Of course, they could be animals who have died a natural death, and they could be animals who have died in accidental death. Now the examples of accidental death are being given. So wal munchanika. So munchanika means an animal which dies by strangling. Wal mawquza. So mawquza means an animal which dies if you hit that animal. Wal mutaraddiya. Al mutaraddiya is an animal that can die because it falls from a cliff or maybe a mountain or maybe a high place. So any animals which dies because of falling is al mutaraddiya. One natiha, if an animal is killed by the horns, some other animal kills it by its horns. So all these animals will also be classified as maita. So what the Quran is telling here is that maita is not just an animal which dies a natural death, but all forms of accidental deaths, like for example an animal that is killed by strangling or by hitting or by the goring of the horns or by falling from a high place. All these animals will also stand prohibited. Wa and ma akala, what has eaten. A sabu, so sabu means a wild animal. Illa, except ma zakkaitum, that you are able to slaughter it. So if an animal has been eaten by a wild animal, but you find it alive and then you are able to slaughter it, then the Quran says that it is fine, you can consume that animal. Wa and ma, that zobeha has been slaughtered. Alan nusub, on altars. Wa and that tastaqsimu bil azlam, that you divide this meat on arrows. We have already discussed this, that this was a rampant Arabic custom in which people would gamble on the meat. They would drink liquor and become inebriated with liquor, and they would gamble on the meat, and that meat would be then distributed among poor people. So the Quran says even that is something that is not allowed. Zalikum fisq. Zalikum, all these things. Fisq, they are a means of defiance. They are means of disobedience to God. And then al-yawma ya'isa allazina kafaru min dinikum. Today, ya'isa means become to lose hope. Allazina, those who kafaru, disbelieved, Al-yawma means today. So today lost hope all those who have disbelieved. Literally this would be its meaning. Today all those who have lost hope, all those who have disbelieved have lost hope. Min dinikum, min from dinikum, your religion. So they have lost hope. What does this mean? It actually means that there is not going to be any compromise, and they have lost hope that, they just cannot prevail on that new religion. So that is why it is said, Fala takhshawhum, fa, therefore la, not. Takhshawhum, fear them. Wakhshawni, in fact, you fear me. So that is what is being said, that they have lost hope in you, in your religion, all those people who have disbelieved. On this day, فَلَا تَخْشَوْهُمْ وَخْشَوْنِي, which means that have no fear of them, but fear me only. This is God telling them. Why? الْيَوْمَ أَكْمَلْتُ لَكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. Al-yawm, this day. Remember, as you can see, this word has been repeated. So this is al-yawm right here, and then we have al-yawm in the previous section of the verse as well, al-yawm, which means today, al-yawm, akmaltu means I have completed, lakum, for you, deenakum, your religion, wa, and atmamtu, I have finished, alaykum, upon you, ni'mati, my favor. Finished upon you my favor, of course, means I have perfected my favor upon you, which means I have also done my due that was upon me, referring to the fact that the religion that started off its revelation 22 years ago or 23 years ago now stands completed. Wa, and raditu. Raditu means that I have chosen for you. In fact, raditu lakum means I have chosen for you. Raditu is just chosen, lakum for you. Al-Islam, the religion of submission, Dina as religion. So I have chosen Islam as your religion. Fa, but, man, he, usturra. Usturra means is forced. Fi, in, makhmasa. So makhmasa means hunger. So he is forced by hunger. Ghaira mutajanifin li ism, except if he does not intend to commit sin. Ghaira mutajanifin li ism, except if he does not intend to commit sin. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ Rahim. Fa, therefore, inna, indeed, Allah is God. Ghafoor is forgiving, and Rahim is merciful. يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا أُحِلَّ لَهُمْ. يَسْأَلُونَكَ, they ask you. These people ask you. What do they ask? مَاذَا أُحِلَّ لَهُمْ. Ma, what? Za is أُحِلَّ لَهُمْ, allowed to them. They ask you what is allowed to them. Qul, you tell them. أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ, allowed for you. At-tayyibat, are all the tayyibat, are all pure and wholesome things. Wa, and ma allamtum min al-jawarihi mukallibina tuallimunahunna would mean ma allamtum min al-jawarihi, what you have taught these animals of hunting. What you have, in fact, you have taught these animals. How do you have taught them? By training, mukallibina, training them. And in a way, you teach them that knowledge. Tuallimunahunna, you teach them that knowledge, mimma, which was allamakum, taught to you by God. Mimma allamakumullah. So in other words, when you train animals, you are actually training them through the knowledge which has been taught to you by God. Mimma allamakumullah, that has been taught to you by God. So tuallimunahunna would mean that you teach them with that knowledge which has actually been taught to you by God. And jawarih, of course, refers to the fact that these are hunting animals. Mukallimina means that they are trained for hunting. Fakulu, fa, therefore, kulu, eat, mimma, from that, amsakna alaykum, they have held for you. In other words, these animals that are hunting animals, whatever they hold back for you, which means that they don't eat for themselves, you can eat from them. Wazkur smallahi alay, wa, and uskuru means pronounce. Ismallah, the name of God, lay on it, which means that when you let loose this animal that has been trained for hunting, then you must do so by pronouncing the name of God. Wattaqullah, fear God. Inna, indeed. Allah, God. Sari, swift. Hisab, in reckoning. Indeed, God is swift in reckoning. Indeed, He is swift in taking account. Al-yawma uhilla lakum at-tayyibat. Al-yawm, today. Uhilla lakum, lawful for you. At-tayyibat, all wholesome things. All and wholesome and pure things are lawful for you. Wa, and ta'amul lazina, the food of Utul kitab, those people who have been given the book, hillul lakum, has been made lawful for you. So the food of all those people who were given the book before you is lawful for you. Wa ta'amukum, and your food, hillul lahum, is lawful for them. Just as your food is lawful to them, their food is lawful to you. Wa, and al muhsanat. So wal muhsanat would mean the decent or the chaste women, min al mu'minat, from the women who are chaste and women who are believers, belong to the believers. Wa, and al muhsanat, who are chaste, and min al lazina utul kitab, they belong to those who were given the book, min qablikum, before you. So what is being said here is that women who are chaste and they belong to the believers, they are lawful to you. And also women who are chaste and they belong to those who were given the book before you. Allazina utul kitab, allazina, those who utu were given, al kitab, the book, min qablikum, min qablikum means before you. They are allowed to you. So that is what is said. But the condition is iza ataytumuhunna, iza, when ataytumuhunna, you give them, ujurahunna, their dowers, you give them their dowers, such that muhsinina, you desire chastity, ghaira musafihina, not lewdness, wala muttakhizi, nor, muttakhizi means to hold, akhdan means paramours, nor indulging in these secret relations. So paramours are of course relations that you relations with men and women that are kept secret, but they are intimate relations. So wala muttakhizi akhdan would mean that women who are pure, of course referring to the fact earlier on, and the condition is that you have to pay their dowers, which is condition number one. And condition number two is that you are not intending any lewdness, or nor you are seeking any secret relationships. La muttakhizi akhdan, muttakhizi means to acquire, akhdan means a secret relation. So that should not be the case. It should be an open case of marriage. Wa, and man he yakfur, denies, bil iman, faith. So he who denies faith or he who rejects faith, faqad, therefore, habita, wasted, amaluhu, his deeds. So anyone who denies faith, his deeds will be wasted, they'll end up in vain. Wa, and huwa, he, fil akhirah, in the hereafter, min al khasirin, amongst the losers, amongst those who will suffer loss. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, again a very similar and a very familiar phrase. O who believe, iza, when, qumtum, you get up, ila salat, towards the prayer, faghsilu, wash, wujuhakum, your faces, wujuhakum, your faces, wa, and aydiyakum, your hands, ila, until, marafiq, marafiq is means your elbow. So mirfaq is elbow and marafiq it is plural. So you wash your hands until your elbows. Wa aydiyakum ila al-marafiq, wamsahu birusikum, and wipe. Imsahu means wipe. Birusikum, your heads, and wipe your heads. Wa arjulakum, and arjulakum means your feet. Ila, towards, or until, al-ka'bain, ankles. You wash your feet until your ankles. Wa, and, in, if, kuntum, you, junuban, you are ceremonially unclean, fattaharu, then you bathe yourselves. If you are ceremonially unclean, then wuzu will not suffice. You have to bathe. Wa, and, in, if, kuntum, you, marda, you are sick, aw, or, ala safir, or are on a journey, aw, or, jaa ahadum minkum, any one of you comes, bin al gha'id, literally it would mean that you come from a lower place, which is lower than the rest of the surface. This is actually a very common phrase of the Arabic language, referring to relieving oneself. So jaa ahadum minkum min al gha'id would mean that if you have relieved yourselves from the call of nature, aw, or, la mastumun nisa, la mastumun would mean you touch, an nisa, women. Again, this is a veiled form of referring to to intercourse. Lamastum means and you've touched your women, of course, referring to the fact that you have been sexually in contact with them. Fa, therefore, lam, not, tajidu, you find, ma, water, and you do not find water. So the conditions are either you're on a journey or you are sick, or you have had intercourse with women, or you have relieved yourself and you don't find water. So the lack of water is the condition that is mentioned, falam tajidu ma'an, is referring to the last conditions, the last two situations, not to suffer or to marda, because they themselves are conditions in which you can do tayammum even if water is available. And then what is said? Fatayammamu. Tayammamu means do dry ablution. Sa'idan tayyiban, from a pure surface or a clean surface. It could be any clean surface from which you can do tayammum. And how is that to be done? So this is the description of tayammum. What is that? Famsahu bi wujuhikum. Famsahu, wipe. Bi wujuhikum, your faces. So you wipe your faces like this. And then wa aydikum, and your hands like this. Minhu, from that the act of wiping that you did should be on your face and on your hands. Ma yuridullahu liyaj'ala alaykum min haraj, which means that God does not want. Ma yuridullahu, God does not want liyaj'ala, to make alaykum, upon you, min haraj, any difficulty. He does not want to create any difficulty for you. Walakin, but yuridu, he wants, liyutahhirakum, to purify you. Wa, and liyutimma ni'matahu, and to complete his favor upon you, alaykum. La'allakum tashkurun, la'allakum, so that tashkurun, you are grateful to him. So signifying the fact that if you are not able to do wudu, then this is God's favor on you, that he wants you to do tayammum, which is dry ablution or dry wudu. And in this way, by not even doing wudu, God wants to complete his favor on you by doing something of a substitute to what is actual wuzu is. And then it is said, Wazkuru ni'matullahi alaykum wa mithaqahu allazi wasakakum bih. Wazkuru, remember, ni'matullah, the favor of God, alaykum, upon you, wa, and mithaqahu, and his covenant. So remember his favor upon you and his covenant. Allazi, that, wasakakum, that you made, that you made actually, which means that remember the covenant with which he bound you with. Wasakakum bihi, with which he actually made you liable of. And what was that? Is when kultum, you said, samina means we listened, wa, and ata'na, we obeyed. So when you said, what did you say? We listened and we obeyed. Remember that covenant. Wa, and ittaqullah, fear God. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, alimun, knows, bizatis sudur, what is in the hearts. Indeed, God knows what is in the hearts. Of course, the word sadr means chest, and sudur is the plural of sadr, which is sudur, and the word chest refers to what is in the chest, of course, which refers to the heart. In other words, it refers to the secrets of the hearts. Alimun bizatis sudur, God knows what is in the hearts, or what he knows the secrets of the hearts. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, O those who believe, kunu qawwameen, stand up for God. Kunu qawwameen lillah, in fact, stand up for God. Shuhada'a bil qist, bearing witness to justice. Shuhada, bearing witness. Bil qist, to justice. So stand up for God, bearing witness to justice. Wala yajrimannakum shana'anu qawmin, and your animosity for a nation should not induce you. Yajrimannakum, not induce you. Wa, not la. Wa is and, la is not. Yajrimannakum, induce you. Shana'anu, enmity. Qawmin, with the nation. So your animosity with the nation should not induce you. Allah, on Allah, that you are not ta'dilu, just. So your animosity with the nation should not induce you to be unjust to them. Allah ta'dilu, that you are not just to them. I'dilu, be just. I'dilu, be just. Huwa, it. Aqrabu, closer. Lit taqwa, to piety. Because it is closer to piety. In other words, justice is closer to piety. Wattaqullah, wa, and ittaqullah, fear God. Inna Allah khabirun bima ta'amalun. Inna, indeed, Allah is God. Indeed, God, khabirun, knowledgeable, bima ta'amalun, what you do. Indeed, God is knowledgeable of what you do. Wa'adallahu allazina amanu wa amilus salihat. So wa'adallah would mean God has promised those who amanu, who have embraced faith, wa amilus salihat, and have done pious deeds. And what has he promised them? Lahum maghfiratun wa ajrun azim. Lahum, for them. Maghfirah, forgiveness. Wa, and Ajrun Azim, a great reward. And Wallazina kafaru, wa and Allazina, those who kafaru, disbelieved, and those who disbelieved, wa and Kazzabu bi ayatina, and Kazzabu means denied, bi ayatina, our revelations. So those who disbelieved and denied our revelations, ulaika, they, ashabul jahim, companions of hell. So those who disbelieved and denied our revelations, they are the companions of hell. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, O those who believe. Uskuru. Uskuru means remember, keep in mind. Ni'matullah, God's favor. Alaykum, upon you. So remember God's favor upon you is when Hamma tried, Qawmun, a nation, an that, Yabsutu, it will spread or stretch, Ilaykum, towards you, Aydiyahum, its hands. So stretching their hands towards you would mean that they are intending to harm you. This is an idiom of the Arabic language, so which means that they are actually trying to harm you. Yabsutu ilaykum aydiyahum, they are trying to harm you. And what happened? Fakaffa, fa, therefore kaffa, stopped. Aydiyahum, so God stopped aydiyahum, He stopped their hands. So ayd, of course, is the plural of yad, and yad is a hand, ayd it's plural, aydiyahum, their hands, ankum, from you. So God stopped their hands from you. So God stopped their hands from harming you. Wa and ittaqullah, fear God. Wa and Allah, upon God. Fal yatawakkil. Fal yatawakkal means trust. Al mu'minun, the believers. So upon God should the believers put their trust. Upon God should the believers repose their trust. So now we finish our literal and idiomatic translation, and now, of course, you can raise any questions that have come to your mind.
Okay, Siddiqa, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thank you. My question is about verse number 8. When it mentions bearing witness to justice and your animosity for a people should not induce you to turn away from justice. Is this only for interpersonal relationships, or does it also apply to political and legal justices?
Well, it applies at all levels, on all situations, in all situations, whether it's your personal, whether it's your national enemy, any enemy. Justice with your enemy is something which the Quran has strongly urged us. Although here it is mentioned in our national capacity, because you see the Quraysh are being referred to, and they are being told that their enmity with you, their animosity with you should not induce you to be unjust to them, because they were once unjust to you. But the inference is that if you have to be just with nations, it's all the more reasonable and all the more important to be just with your individual enemies as well.
Abdul Rahman sir, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thank you. So my question is with regards to the words about the religion is, this day we have completed your religion. So one thing I am trying to understand is that when the sciences of interpretation of Quran is always developing, how can we say that the religion has been completed? Because in every century some new interpretation, some new science is getting evolved, and the previous interpretation is getting so solidified in the community, Muslim community, they are reluctant to change. So this creates a lot of sects. So how can we say that the religion is complete and final?
So you see, the completion of religion is regarding the text of the religion. Understanding can be different from the times of the Prophet until the end of times. Even in the times of the Prophet, when he was alive, people would differ, and they would come to him at times to make a decree or judgment, and at times they could not do so. So the understanding of religion is one thing, and the completion of the text of the religion is another thing. So the fact that the Quran is complete, its revelation stands completed, that is what is being referred to here. It's not the understanding that is being referred to. Understanding is something that is a human endeavor, that is left to human interpretation. But what the Almighty is pointing out here is that the revelation of the text of the Quran, which began so many years ago, now has finished. Now He has completed His favor upon you, because His responsibility was not interpreting the Quran, His responsibility was giving the Quran. So He has given the Quran, and now it's upon us to understand it.
Sir, just a follow-up question on that, sir. Sir, is the personality of Prophet Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is important to us, or the message he has brought to the entire humanity? Because uh, I, I mean, my personal observation is that Muslims are obsessed with the personality of Prophet Muhammad. So almost like it's like God for most of the Muslims. So
So you see, there is this element of extremism in their sentiments, and they have at times elevated Prophet Muhammad to much more than what he would himself has posed, and what God has made him as a prophet and as a human being. So that is an extremism which Muslims are guilty of. Otherwise, we have to respect the person of the prophet, and we have to have a certain regard for his person, and of course for the message he has brought. So both things are very important, and both things, they are intertwined. Don't judge this by what Muslims are doing today, because, as I said, just as Christians have elevated the person of Jesus to be God, virtually to be God. So, by what they do, we cannot judge Jesus himself. Similarly, by what Muslims have done, we should not judge the status of Muhammad by what they are doing. The Quran itself has explained the status of Prophet Muhammad, and that is that he should be dear to us with all our life. We should be respectful to him. We should owe this love and regard to him, because of the fact that the message that he has brought down is a message that, if we follow, will end up as those who have succeeded in the hereafter. And at the same time, he has put his life in difficulty to give us this message, and that is precisely why, or what makes us attached, makes me attached to him, or should make all of us attached to him, to his personality, because it's not just that he has given what he was told to give. He has gone way above the call of his duty. He has suffered a lot. He has still made his impact, and he has continued to do that for ages through the teaching that he has given us. So I would say that both are very important, but the importance has something to do with what the Quran has told us. But you should not judge that importance by what Muslims are doing today. So they are, of course, they are indulging in extremism.
Dr. Saleem, I
thank
have
you
a
so much,
chat
sir.
question. Does verse
Right.
11 refer to the Jewish who planned to kill the Prophet, in which Allah revealed that the Prophet should not go to dinner with them when he had invited them?
Verse 11.
Ji, there's a
No, that
question.
is certainly not the case. It says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu zkuru ni'matallahi alaykum iz hamma qaumun. This is just referring to the fact that the Quraysh wanted to harm him. We know it's not just the Prophet, they wanted to harm the Muslims. They did not want them to prevail. They persecuted them when they were in Mecca. When they had migrated to Medina, they had attacked them. The first battle, of course, was an attack from them. And then persistently, we see that they wanted to connive with the Jews and try to bring down the Prophet. So that is what is being mentioned here, that the Prophet was promised that ultimately he'll prevail. And in fact, all messengers of God, about them, the promise of the Quran is that they might suffer initially, but ultimately they are going to prevail. So that is a reminder that the Quran is sounded here. That don't get dejected, or don't forget that God's help is not at hand, because this is what He has done. He has saved you from an enemy who was after your life. That is what is meant here. There is no incident that is referred to here, as may have been mentioned in some of our tafsir books.
Okay. Salman Aziz Saab, please ask your question.
Sir,
Salman
the
sir.
slaughter of people of the book is allowed, but do you have to check that their method is also correct, that they slaughter in a way that all the blood is flushed out of the body or not?
You see, in the times of the Prophet, this was what was done. They used to take the name of God, and they used to slaughter the animal. No more today, because we know from history that right after Jesus' departure, Saint Paul actually totally altered their Sharia, and in fact, they abrogated it for all non-Jews. He said that the Sharia is just for the Jews. All other people, it's not meant for them. So the followers of Jesus, it was sufficient for them that if they professed faith in his crucifixion, that he has come to save mankind, or atone for the sins of mankind, that is sufficient for them. So he actually abrogated the Sharia for all non-Jews. And today, Christians are basically followers of this Pauline form of Christianity. So this, of course, is something that is referred to in the times of the Prophet. Remember, the words are al-yawm. Today, everything has become clear, and now they are slaughtering in the right way. But we know that right after that, this is not something that had happened.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. So I have no more raised hands at this time. We
So
have
request for a follow-up, please, if possible.
Yeah, please
I'm
go
Yes.
ahead.
unable to understand them. That you were saying that for nowadays it's not halal to eat the zabiha of people of the book.
Correct. Because you see, in the
Okay.
times of the Quran, when the Quran was had been revealed, and this verse was had revealed, we know that once again they knew that now the correct form of slaughter after Saint Paul had abrogated that Sharia is not the one that they themselves were eating. They themselves knew that the right form of slaughter today is the fact that they have to slaughter the animal in the right way, which means taking the name of God and slaughtering the animal by its jugular vein so that the blood pours out. So this was something which that abrogated Pauline Sharia of the times of Jesus, after passing through these, let's say, 500 years, had once again turned back to its original form. And in the times of the Prophet, this is what they understood. The righteous among the people of the book. Remember, we are talking about the righteous among the people of the book, that they once again were able to realize that the slaughter which is prohibited, was prohibited for them, is not what they were doing so, and the right form of slaughter is the one in which they have to take the name of God and slaughter it in the right way.
There's a istikhara question. What is the benefit of praying istikhara? Can we pray istikhara for making ease in marriage for a specific person, or just it can be prayed for eliminating confusion?
You see, istikhara is just a dua, it's just a supplication. And as is the case with any supplication, either God will respond to it in a positive way, and whatever you ask in your dua, which is istikhara, and the word istikhara means that you are at a crossroad, you are not fully aware which path to take. Both paths, or maybe three paths that are in front of you, are equally, they make equal sense. So basically, istikhara is a dua that is made when you have exhausted all your intellect and all your practice and all your options, and you are not able to decide which way to take, and you feel that two or three different options that are available to you, all of them make sense. So now you're asking God that, God, whichever of these equal options that I consider equal, make the one which is more suitable for my world, my next world, and for my own self, make it destined for me. So this is what istikhara is all about. So first of all, you have to be at that crossroads, which people often don't know. They just think that istikhara is like a hotline with God, and as soon as you say this prayer or you ask others to pray for you, then something is going to come up, which is of course a big misconception. It's like any dua and any supplication, and that too in these circumstances when you have done your best and you're not being able to make sense of any of the options that are available to you. So in this situation, you say, God, please help me find which is the better one. So at times, God will help you through His various ways. At times, He will just remain silent, and at times, He will just defer it. At other times, He will just make it a means of reward in the hereafter, because dua itself is a form of ibadah, it's a form of worship. So all these outcomes are possible. I mean, it's like any other dua. The only difference is that, I mean, you have to understand that duas are always made once you have exhausted your own effort. I mean, you just don't pick up hands and raise your hands before God and ask Him to do something unless you have done your due. So basically, istikhara means that you have done your due. You have a couple of options before you, and you're not being able to decide which of them should be the one that you adopt. And that is as simple as that. If you raise your hands to before God, He might respond and He might not respond. So that is how we should understand istikhara.
Ruhi Rasool, you can ask your question, and this is going to be the last question for the day. So please go ahead, unmute your mic and ask your question, Ruhi.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, my question is uh, on ayat number 6, which explains the details of wuzu. In it says, "Wa arjulukum ilal kabain." I'm confused about this word kabain. It means
Kab means
two
ankle.
kabas.
It means ankle. The word kab
Ankle.
means ankle. So you have to wash your feet until your ankles.
Isn't Kaaba means we actually refer Kaaba to God's house, isn't
No,
it?
no, no. That's a
Kaaba.
different word. That is entirely a different word. That is Kaaba. This is Kab. Kab is an ankle in Arabic.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem, for your wisdom and for a wonderful session, for answering everybody's question and explaining to us Surah Maida. Inshallah, we'll see everybody next week. Take care and we'll meet again. Khuda Hafiz, everyone.